We would like to say hello to you from a hot Cyprus afternoon. Um, we are organizing this seminar as Eastern Mediterranean University Urban Research and Development Center. The seminar is going to be given by Mr. Jason Wynn, who is the Director of Narrative Infrastructures. And he will be talking about his project on students' map stories, class introduction, and it will be a seminar for educators, basically. So before taking too much time, I would like to give the screen to Jason so that he can start explaining his project, and then we will have a couple of discussions afterwards. Yes, Jason, thank you for this opportunity, and we hope that you will be benefiting from this seminar.
Thank you, Shebna. So this project, which we're going to be talking about today, is based on narrative infrastructure, but it's about students, and it's about seeing how we can take your students and turn them into ethnographers, in a manner of speaking. And what that means is giving them the opportunity and the tools to sit down and talk with their family elders, whether it's their parents or their grandparents, and gather the stories from their parents or grandparents and do something quite remarkable with them. Now, I got this idea a long time ago with I guess 1992, I sat down with my grandmother, that's her on the right, to do a class project from my 10th grade social studies class. And the project was to interview a grandparent and ask them about growing up in their time. And I was really excited to engage in this project, and it turned out to be the longest conversation I ever had with my grandmother. And I got to ask her all kinds of interesting things, like, is our heritage actually Scottish, or is it Irish or Welsh? And were our family actually horse thieves during the Civil War? It turns out that we weren't. And what did a squirrel have to do with my grandfather's courtship of my grandmother? And why did it have to die? This was a really fascinating experience for me, and it really helped me understand my grandmother in a new and completely different way. But 10 years later, Aunt Kathy went and did several interviews with Grandma and got a transcript together and published it into a book called Ain't Livin' Fun by Barbie T. Wynn. And this is an incredibly important part of the heritage of our family now. It is the stories that she didn't have time to tell to us each individually, but now they're all in one location for us all to actually understand how she came through the Great Depression, how her early married years during the Second World War affected her, and what life was like after the war and the Reconstruction. And what's fascinating to think about is that these stories are in everybody's heads. And if we could just get those stories out of their heads, one thing's really fascinating about stories is each one has a setting. And if it has a setting, that means we can map it. We can paint the landscape with these people's stories. This is what I call a kind of narrative infrastructure. Now, a narrative infrastructure is not dissimilar to the ideas of a civil infrastructure of your electricity or the power, water, and the sewer systems or the roads. It's the structure that holds the city together. You can't really understand what's going on in a city if you don't understand the stories behind it. You can see monuments and buildings, but without understanding the stories that made those things, the meaning behind them isn't clear. And narrative infrastructure kind of holds the fabric of the community together, kind of like a rug. And it's the parts that you can't see, the knots of the rug that make it beautiful, that's what you understand to be the beauty of the environment. But why it holds together the way it does, or if it's not holding together, why is it not holding together? This is when we start talking about the warp and the weft, sort of our communities. Now, I created the initial attempt at narrative infrastructure here in Famagusta, Cyprus, with 8 different storytellers. And we got about 75 different located stories from that. And it was a fascinating experience to find out how the stories overlap, how they interfere with one another, or how they bunch together by theme. That kind of tells us something about the neighborhood of those stories, and sometimes even where the stories are missing and what that implies as well. Last year, I had a really fascinating exploration, first with a poet, and second with a biomedical AI engineer. And this was a time for me to actually try and analyze narrative infrastructure as a concept that we could bring forward in this new world of artificial intelligence. And after several months of work on this subject, I came to the realization that the AI tools that we need to make this happen are already in existence. It's really just a matter of putting them into the correct hands. And out of that was born the idea of the Chat Maps Workshop. This is a class that you can offer to your students. The initial class, which is the introduction to the tools and how to use them and why to use them, is a one-day experience, about 45 minutes worth of work. The students then take that information home as their homework, prepare an interview, conduct the interview, organize and map their data, and then share it with their teacher and with narrative infrastructure. Now that you actually then have a narrative infrastructure, you can do a variety of different things with that second class. You could look at a local challenge that your community is facing and come up with a completely new approach based off of the stories in the community. Or you could have a poetry class, practically taking those stories that you gathered and turned them into pieces of poetry that are geolocated on the land. Or you could even make a local tour just to help newcomers understand the community. Perhaps you could write a locative fiction system with our partner over at Story City, where you can create an adventure for people to explore the city, infused with the real stories of the community. Or even a public design response based on the stories, so that you could actually have a piece of public art that represents the stories that your students collected. During that first class, the most important part is the exercise. Helping the students understand why they're doing this, how to craft their questions, find their storyteller, understand how transparency and consent work, and understand how to work within boundaries. Then, of course, you'll need the tools, which are already available and free to use. And then, of course, if you can, try and have 2 devices so that you're prepared. Once the students have that and they take it home, the initial exercise of the interview is pretty straightforward. You test your equipment, complete your forms, and then start asking questions and let the people talk. Crucially, they're going to be having a conversation with the storyteller and the map at the same time. This allows them to coordinate the locations that the storyteller is mentioning with actual locations on a digital map. Quickly save those to the proper file, and then wrap it up. Say thanks, stop your equipment, and make sure you take everything that you arrived with. The second part of the homework exercise is about preparing that transcript and combining it with the map. There looks like there's a lot of steps here, but it's actually very straightforward and simple to accomplish. The opportunities that this kind of tool that you will be creating in your classroom are substantial and integrated. If the students are collecting the stories and they're processing those into a narrative infrastructure, they're creating detailed maps of public sentiment that are available to the public. Whether we're talking about citizens or civil servants, economic developers, now all these different user groups have a powerful new tool that they can use to do things like jumpstart grassroots organizing, test new civil proposals at a concept stage, or even frame new proposals from those local stories, like new business ideas. And the end result is that the storyteller's citizen participation is meaningfully increased, and not just once, but for all time. Their story can be carried on the map forever and can influence these stakeholders for generations to come. So, how do you get started with this? The first step is, of course, connect with the Narrative Infrastructure website. We'll get you the support you need. You can download your materials. And I would recommend take it for a spin. Give this project a try. You can interview your own parent or grandparent and see what you're going to be asking your students to do. I'll help you get them on the map. The student's website for the lore mapper gives the students a step-by-step process to help them understand what to do as they learn how to do this, how they get into an interview, and then what to do with it after they've got it. You can teach directly from this website so that the students see everything in one place. They can see what to do and how to do it, including video tutorials for each step using the tools. And ultimately, you are rounding up with year after year building this narrative infrastructure in your community that becomes something that you can access back again for your individual requirements with your organization, whether that's going to be looking at your civics curriculum, arts curriculum, economics curriculum. These kinds of maps that are on a civil infrastructure format are going to be useful for years to come, not just to you, but also to the community. But I want you to make sure you have the tools you need in an easy to access format. So the teacher's website breaks down everything I'm telling you right now, tells you an overview of the workshop to offer, how those benefits actually turn into key activities, and you can then use this to explain it to your organization and your administrators. Everything you need to download is on that same webpage: lesson plans, the tools, and the information about the learning outcomes. To close the cycle with your community with this, we created a third part of the website called the Neighbors website. The Neighbors website includes 12 different organizations that we already know can make use of a narrative infrastructure in your community. We go through each one of them one by one and explain how their particular stakeholder needs are met by narrative infrastructure. Whether we're talking about long-term residents of the community, or people engaged in political activity, the people who are actually administrating the community, the economic developers, or the artists. There's a variety of different audiences for this information, and if you're interested, we're more than willing to help you connect with those people in your community, perhaps even get them in your classroom so that they can help close the gap for your students, so they can see what they're doing is not merely meaningful long-term, but meaningful right now. This idea really came into focus early last year with the story of Barry. Barry Matchett was 13 years old in 1986, and he decided to undertake 48 oral history interviews using a cassette recorder for his community of University Park in Denver, Colorado. I discovered his stories at Denver University in an archive and converted them to 450 located stories that has now become the narrative infrastructure of University Park in Denver, creating a beautiful tapestry of the community's stories that the community can now use. Thank you very much for coming, and I appreciate your time. If you're interested in joining us, please use the QR code on the screen or come to the website at narrativeinfrastructure.org. I look forward to helping you with your classes this upcoming fall. Thank you very much.
I have a couple of questions. The website and the project is designed for what level of educators? Why I ask this question is, can we, for example, use it at a postgraduate course, in a postgraduate course, or does it have to be in, lower levels like high school kids or secondary schools? Is it adaptable? If you could explain.
It's adaptable for any age, I presume, above 13 years old.
Okay.
If someone can do it with someone younger, that's fantastic. But I have proof that Barry Matchett could pull it off as a 13-year-old, so I know it's possible to at least start there. And so that includes everything from 7th year on upwards.
Okay. And can it be done on a team base? For example, I've got a course on public spaces. It's a course on, urban public spaces. Can I use this platform to get narratives on different public spaces, let's say in Nicosia? by getting, stories from the tourists, from the locals, from, the visitors in the city, or from a child playing on a public space? Is it adaptable on a team base?
It's adaptable on multiple different user type basis. Saying it being in a team environment would suggest that they would be trying to conduct the interview as a team, and that wouldn't quite make a lot of sense. You could conduct an interview in a pair, maybe two people working with one storyteller. More than that gets a little confusing, I would imagine, but it could be experimented with in that kind of a format. But as far as the application of collecting narrative infrastructure is fully dynamic. It can be used in a variety of different contexts based off of the goals of a researcher. We're presenting this right now as a school tool, but that doesn't mean that that's the limitation of it. Anyone can be a lore mapper.
Mm. So, for example, I can be as a researcher, I go to different public spaces and I um, I do some interviews with different types of people and I put all the data on a map. Does it work like that as well?
Yes, it does. And it becomes a secondary level of mapping. The narrative infrastructure itself is limited to narratives. So
Yeah.
that then becomes your resource that you would then take into another environment to use for additional layer data. But the
Yeah.
information is fungible because it's using a GIS platform. So the information can then be withdrawn and reinserted into another GIS environment and then added to. More layers can then be brought to that narrative infrastructure, which is the intent. The intent is for other organizations to be able to use the GIS located data the same way they use economic located data, crime located data, housing located data. That's why we're using the GIS, because Geographic Information Systems is the standard for civil management. Is this available in the UK? And the answer is this system is available planet-wide. Any place that has a GPS system, their latitude and longitude, that's the only requirement. We just need to know where the stories are located by latitude and longitude, so they can be placed anywhere.
Do you mind if you go back to your presentation or maybe show the website and show the links where the teachers can reach the information and the students? Is it reachable at the moment?
The first point that I would want everyone to know is that whatever language you need this in, you let me know. We can set it up for auto-translate in different languages. And this is the landing page that's just to explain the general ideas to anyone who wants to understand this project, and explains very briefly how this has an impact over decades, if not centuries. That creating this is a permanent improvement to a community. The Lore Mapper site, which is the heart of the project, this is the literal, you can teach directly from this website as a presentation tool. These drop downs take you through the process one step at a time, how to become a lore mapper, how to even find your storytellers, downloads for consent forms or how to make consent forms, the tools to download in order for the students to collect the data, and then what to do when they actually get out into the world and start making interviews. How to use the tools one step at a time, including video tutorials so that they can get up to speed very quickly. My experience so far with this has been the younger community is much more comfortable with these tools on day one than their teachers. So that's an important advantage we're going to be taking, is that young people these days are internet natives. They've always known how to use these kinds of tools, and the interfaces are common to them, so they're quite ready to use them immediately. Including how to pull their transcript together is just like making to a degree, is like making a TikTok video. And let's take a jump then over to the teacher's website.
And teachers will spend hours to understand.
Once you've worked with it for about 10 or 15 minutes and you realize it's a repetitive process, it goes pretty quickly after that. The teacher's website giving you the overview, your curriculum and lesson plans, an example page, and a place to sign up for the workshop and get connected with narrative infrastructure so that our organization can support your classes. And then, of course, a nod quickly to Barry's experience in University Park, Denver. And again, the same explanation why this is important long term. And then finally,
does the school or the institution have to register to be able to use that, or is it totally free to use?
It requires direct involvement with narrative infrastructure in order to translate what they're gathering using the free apps and translate those into the GIS component. So the GIS component becomes a level of effort that's required that requires a degree of speciality in order to accomplish. We hope to automate that in the future, but we need to get more narrative infrastructures mapped across the world in order to go and start asking for the funding we need to create a GIS-powered interface so that we can remove the middleman, as it were. Mm-hmm. So this is the neighbor's website. And each one of these takes you to an individual page. There we go. That will help that organization or that type of organization understand how to utilize narrative infrastructure, breaking it down by their common issues that they actually engage with, and then how narrative infrastructure can help make those problems go away or become more manageable. So those include a wide variety of audiences, everything from long-term residents, people who have lived in a neighborhood forever, people who are just arriving, refugees or immigrants, or people relocating for work, neighborhood associations, which is how this got started here in Famagusta, economic development corporations, how they can actually help individual organizations who are looking to open up businesses become more accommodating to the local environment and the local culture by understanding the actual stories on the ground. Where artists, urban and regional planners, the actual people who manage the cities, the people who are elected to look after the city, those who are administrating the zoning, non-governmental organizations or community support organizations, how they can work closer with their stakeholders and create more opportunities, or for chambers of commerce who are in the business of helping to promote a city. And nothing can help promote a city than showing the actual heart of the community. That's the website in a nutshell.
I'm thinking of projects like, how to integrate this to possible classes, like to get stories of how students experience Famagusta, how tourists experience Famagusta, how foreigners or expats experience Famagusta, how Famagustians experience Famagusta, how Greek Cypriot Famagustians experience Famagusta, and see how all these narratives can reveal a Famagusta that everyone can find common zones. I'm thinking of turning this into a research project using your chat maps, Jason, but I'm not sure of how to integrate it technically yet. But that's exciting. Thank you very much.
Yes, I'm really interested in this. I am a professional traditional oral storyteller in Scotland on the Traditional Arts and Culture Scotland Directory Tellers. And I've actually done a 2-year project in I know we're talking to people around the world, the River Clyde, where a lot of the ships came from. The cutty being one of them that you may have heard of. It depends which part of the world you're in. But I think this could be an interesting tool for storytellers, especially traditional oral storytellers. And part of what we do is collecting local stories. A lot of that. And I wish I'd known it. I wish I'd known this existed quite a few years ago, because I've had to learn it very much myself, being of, how would one put it, mature years, although not inside. So I'm fascinated with this. I have been in the former life a teacher also, but nursery. And surprisingly, you can get stories from nursery children, really. And their grandparents and their parents. It's quite interesting. But yeah, I'm quite interested in this, especially since I was on the Scottish Storytelling Forum for Scotland, deciding about what, directions of where storytelling's going. Oral storytelling is going in Scotland, and indeed as it fits into the world. So I'm very interested in that. So I really like the idea. I think it's really good, because that's one of the frustrations I find. Obviously our curriculum is a bit different from American curriculum, and indeed, believe it or not, it's different from English and Irish curriculums. So Scotland is a bit more flexible. So and I find it very, very interesting. Not quite sure what would like to do with it, but I'm thinking it would be interesting to do something with it. So thank you, Jason. Really, really interesting.
Thank you for coming. And as a food for thought, when I converted Barry Matchett's collection, it had been sitting idle for 40 years almost. So even something that's gathering dust on the shelf, we can map it if we can figure out where the locations are mentioned in those stories.
Now that's very interesting, actually, immediately for me, because in Western Barton it's been picked up by a local sort of community activist group, and I actually researched thoroughly all the stories, interviewing people from every angle you could think of about a community farm, which sadly died a death, but is now used as something else to do with rehabilitating drug and alcohol addicts in a positive way through growing things. Actually, this might be quite interesting, because it's difficult to know what to do with all the material I've accumulated, which is vast. This may be the answer to the problem, because we're going to be collecting more stories come September. And possibly ongoing. It might be really useful. I would probably quite like to talk to you, Jason, maybe a bit more.
Absolutely. I look forward to it.
I think from Urban Research and Development Center's point of view, or let's say EMU point of view, although we are giving graduate or undergrad, bachelor's, master's, or PhD level classes in different faculties, especially urban-based courses or courses maybe in also Faculty of Education can benefit from the website. I think that's why we were interested in this seminar when Jason proposed that he wanted to do it under the umbrella of Urban Research and Development Center. So that will, I think, open up new horizons for us as higher education institution, as lecturers, professors on urban or architecture or education level. But we will hopefully give a kind of output as this recording to the school teachers in Famagusta, in Nicosia, in Cyprus, and elsewhere in the world, because we will provide the recording on our website, and obviously you will be able to reach Jason personally for his project. So I'd like to thank you, Jason, for sharing your project with us. And keep going. Let's see how we will adapt ourselves within your project.
Thank you for your continued support, Hocam.